right, we are live. Welcome everybody to this week's eLearning Career Chat. For those of you who have not joined us in the past or maybe watched a recording before and this is your first time joining, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. For those of you, again, if it's your first time joining, these sessions are completely unplanned, unscripted. We don't have any content that we're sharing. It's just a conversation between my guest Kassy and I about career stuff, virtual instructor-led training, all that good stuff. As we're talking, you can submit questions for either Kassy or myself or both of us in the questions pod or the questions tab, which is up next to the chat tab. And while you're there, you can upvote on everyone else's questions. And about halfway through, we'll start tackling those. So hi, Kassy. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Even though we saw each other in person just like the other week, I feel like it's been a while since we've had a chance to ever sit down and have a good conversation. So I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. I agree with you, and I'm really excited about this. As you know, I love this topic. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's what you do every single day, virtual instructor-led training. The reason, well, actually, before we jump into some of the stuff I want to talk about, can you take a moment, tell people a little bit about, what it is that you do currently, but if you can one of the things I always ask my guests is kind of give the Cliff Notes version overview of their career and how you got into what it is that you do, because I always find that to be fascinating to hear that journey. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your career journey.
Yeah, thank you. This is a fun story.
Yeah.
Well, importantly, I teach people how to do virtual training and how to not be boring when they're delivering it. So many of us just, read slides and then wonder why no one has questions and wonder how the heck we're supposed to connect with people in this online environment. And so I do train the trainer certificates, train the instructional designer for virtual training, and I also do train the producer, which everyone knows you always want to have your sidekick so you don't have to worry about things when they break, as they always do. So that's the world that I've lived in for the last 23 years.
Oh, wow.
I know. So I'm one of those people. I definitely did not go to college to become a person who taught people how to be virtual trainers. I was living in San Francisco during those years, and I was driving down the 101, if anyone knows that really fun highway that's cupped in like very, very traffic filled.
Yep.
And there was a giant billboard with RuPaul, and RuPaul was in a green and blue outfit.
Okay.
And it said, you got to Google this.
Yeah.
We've got to start meeting like this. I was like, what is it? It was an ad campaign being run by WebEx.
Okay.
And that was WebEx, the green and blue, before it was Cisco. And as I'm driving down, I'm like, I want to work there. So it turns out they were hiring. I was a Microsoft trainer. I have a background in public speaking and acting. I was traveling all around the San Francisco Bay Area teaching people how to use Microsoft applications. And I saw that ad, or I saw that billboard, and then I thought, I wonder if they're hiring. That would be fun, because it was the late 90s. There's a lot of really amazing companies and a lot of tech happening in the Bay Area at that time. Yeah. And I interviewed and got a job as a product trainer. And so it's because of RuPaul that I started my virtual training career way back then.
That's such a cool story.
Yeah.
So fast forward to now. So you currently, I don't know if you mentioned this when you were saying what you do now, but you run your own business. This is what you do full time as a business, right?
Yes. Like, so what happened is I learned how to, so I was a technical trainer teaching clients how to use WebEx when they bought it.
Okay.
And so my background is tech training. And I love that. But then people would say to me, okay, well, we get where we click, but how do we be like you? How do we engage people? And, the theater side of me loved that part probably more than click on share screen.
Yeah.
So I started studying, the instructional design side and learning and development, and found this wonderful world that you and I get to live in. And I sort of transitioned that way and said, I'm going to start teaching people how to be good at whatever technology they use in this virtual environment. Because that was 99 when I did that. And, a couple of years later, the world changed and a lot of people didn't want to travel after what happened. And, different things have happened. So I knew that virtual communications was going to be more than what it was at the time. And now, who knew? I couldn't have predicted what happened in the last 18 months, but goodness.
Oh, I know.
But that's how that went for me. And so I ended up working at WebEx for a long time. And then I went to work for another organization that was teaching people how to do virtual training. I was a contract trainer with them, like a facilitator for hire. I learned all their stuff, loved it so much. But then I met Dale Carnegie. And Dale Carnegie in 2011 was launching the business Dale Carnegie Digital to take a 100-year-old company into the online world. And I was on the leadership team that did that. And I was hired as the subject matter expert or the product design architect. And we put that whole business together. And within 4 years, we built a $4 million business.
That's
and
so cool.
It's still thriving today. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then after I did that, though, for 6 years, I said, I'm going to go back to working for me. And so now I do that same thing. I help companies all over the world figure out how to do it. In the last 18 months, people had to do it.
Yep.
And I live in the space of how do I do it well?
Right.
And how do we make it actually work rather than as I had to and had no other choice, solution.
Right. Exactly. Doing it under duress. Right. I was just talking, I've mentioned this before, but I was just talking to a group about this yesterday evening about how, as awful as the pandemic has been, obviously, as a society, if this was going to happen, we're kind of fortunate it happened at the time that it did, in the sense that, if you go back like 10, 12, 15 years, the concept of working remotely was still in its infancy for a lot of companies. A lot of companies didn't have virtual collaboration tools or different ways to do all the things that we're doing now. And we're kind of, in a weird way, we're fortunate that we were able to, quickly pivot into, whatever I was going to say, our new normal, but I don't want to say that.
Right. I mean, we were in position to do it than anybody was willing to admit or be part of. And that's the world that I used to live in. Like, hey guys, it'll be okay. We can do this. And, as a result, my business was always very much like centered around the basics.
Sure.
And then what ended up happening in the last 18 months is now we're finally in the place where I have been for decades. And I'm super excited now in, what's ahead for my business, because finally people are wanting to advance. Like I'm doing a keynote next week, and the topic is virtual training's here to stay. Now what?
Yeah.
And what does it look like to advance our skills, to do more? And I feel like I've been living there for quite a while. Like, to me, it's such a normal thing that I now have to back up and go, wait, you don't already do that? Oh, right. Okay, great. And here's how we do that now in the way, that works. And it's cool too, because now things are being developed to help me do what I've always wanted to do better.
Yep. Yeah. There's so many different tools now on the market. I mean, in the last 18 months, all the different tools for stuff like this and the different platforms that have been released to allow us to better connect online or virtually facilitate. It's been really remarkable. When I look back at, I was talking to somebody about this a few weeks ago, and I was telling them about, when I reflect on the last 18 months and how it's affected my business. I don't focus on virtual instructor-led training, but I focus on e-learning, but I think this is true as well for virtual instructor-led training. Is a lot of companies weren't prepared to make that pivot either to virtual instructor-led training or asynchronous, e-learning. And so when I look back at the last, the first half of 2020, it was all done really haphazardly. They just, quickly converted stuff online. And then the second half of the year, I think companies started realizing, okay, we're kind of in this for longer than we thought. Now we need to bring people in to actually do it right. And then, the second half of 2020 was super busy for me. I know you mentioned that you've been super busy. And now I think we're in this new phase where companies are really starting to realize that there's always going to be some people who are not going to be in the office in some capacity. And that whether it's virtual instructor-led training or asynchronous e-learning, that it's not just a nice to have, it's a necessary part of our training strategy. I don't know. Does that at all, when you think back on that, would you agree with that?
I 100% agree with that. And what's really interesting is not only are they coming at it from that attitude of this is going to now be a part of it, but they're also like, and we've been missing out.
Right. Yeah.
They're recognizing how much how much their learning programs could have benefited from this component. And they're like, darn it, we're never going to let that happen again.
Oh, I know.
It's exciting to see, and I like to focus on the positive side of the changes because, you're right about, I hadn't thought about that before. If these things had to happen, we really were in position to be able to manage it in many ways, not in all ways, but certainly in many ways than we would have been even just a decade ago.
Yeah, our technology infrastructure was ready to handle it. I mean, I can think of countless things where our society wasn't ready to handle it, obviously, but the technology was there to allow us to at least make that transition in a way that allowed people to continue on with their lives in some semblance from home, right, in their jobs.
Right.
So let's talk about, we were talking before we came on live. One of the things I was telling you was, there's so many people out there trying to make a transition into the world of corporate learning and development, instructional design, e-learning development and training. And right now, I feel like a lot of the focus gets put on the instructional design side or the e-learning development side of that equation. And one area that I don't think gets enough attention is that there's a whole world of facilitation, whether it's in-person or virtual instructor-led facilitation, or even design for in-person facilitation or virtual instructor-led facilitation that kind of gets missed. And so, I don't know. I don't know where my question is in there, but I'm curious to know, like, what are your thoughts on that being a viable option for folks as they're looking to transition out of whatever they're doing? Either they might be teachers, they might be something else. I'm curious your thoughts there.
Well, and I think that the reason that you don't know where your question was in that is pretty valid, because it's pretty clear when you're looking for, if companies are looking for instructional designers, what we need them to do. And what they need to do is broad. And in fact, just hats off to all of you, because geez, what you are asked to know and do, it's like a little bit of a mind blow to me.
Yeah.
Be all things at all times to everyone is what it seems like. Where, virtual instructor-led training is the world of training delivery.
Yep.
The world of, if you're a facilitator. So where you see this is like people who do presentation skills training, and then the people that are presenters. That's where virtual instructor-led training comes in, because it's like, it's a skill to add to your toolbox. Is it a career path to be a virtual instructor-led trainer? I mean, I've made it that way, but that's because my business is train the trainer, and I teach people to do that one thing, which is a big thing. But people will come to me all the time after they've gone through my programming, and they'll say, I want to get a job as a virtual trainer. What do I do? And I'm like, what you need to do is get a job as a trainer. Right. Yep. And then virtual will be expected of you as part of the skill set. So like an instructional designer has a set of tools that they need to know how to use and do that often are technical, right? In the case of a presenter, you need to be able to present to, are you a keynoter? Are you a person who does moderation? And virtual instructor led now becomes part of what you're expected to do. In our world today, anybody who's a public speaker or trainer or a facilitator or a consultant for that matter needs to also know how to have virtual instructor-led training skills.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's expected. And so that's where it lives. It's like part of being a presenter, part of being a speaker.
Right. And I think
because of that, Tim, sorry, I just thought about because of that, in some ways, some companies are like, just do it. They don't realize people need to learn to do it until after they've failed at it quite a bit. Almost every single client I'm working with has failed, and that's why they find me. Yeah. It isn't because they're onboarding and they think, let's do this. They're just like, go train. And then they realize the training's not working. Why not? They look at the design first, usually. And they should. And then they like, well, wait, the trainer isn't delivering on that. They don't know how to work in this technical environment we now live in. Right.
I mean, how much would you say, so when you compare what happens in a classroom in person compared to, say, the same thing that's happening in a virtual environment, a synchronous virtual environment. A lot of companies, I think, to your point, they're like, just do it. Like, just do what you were doing in person, do it virtually. It's a one-for-one conversion. It's the same thing with like with e-learning. You don't take what you did in the classroom and just, add audio narration and a next button and call it e-learning. You're really starting from the ground up. So is it that dramatic of a difference with virtual instructor-led training, or is it, what percentage of that training, if you can put a percentage on it, has to be adapted, changed, altered to really optimize that virtual environment?
I think people do that. I think they think that it's just what you said. Just go online. Just do what you do in person. And it is my experience. We need to start over.
Yeah.
But that said, when I start over, I want to pull from what the outcome was from what I was doing, because it's what's known. It's sort of classic adult learning. Help people learn something new by basing it off of something they already know. And so a classic example for me, I just presented about this at ATD last week, but it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know what day it is anymore. Like here's a classic thing that we do in person. You have a ball and you throw it around the room, and that's whose turn it is next to do the thing.
Yeah.
To do the conversation starter, and for whatever purpose you're using that. And so, are you going to do that online? Obviously not. You're going to go throw a ball to a different country, Right. So, but what's the objective of that? And, you look at, well, that's to allow participants to choose who goes next and to create energy and excitement. Okay, so I get pictures of everybody. I put it on a PowerPoint slide. We use annotation tools, and we circle the person who's going to go next. Mm-hmm. I circle you. You're on my slide, actually, Tim. I circle you, and then I go, Tim, you're not, do the thing, the question, and then circle the next person. And that's like you threw the ball. So right. I'm pulling from what we do in person, but I'm not doing it exactly in the same way. And so it is a ground up conversion, but I like to draw from. And another thing that's important too is that in person, we would have 6 hours of instruction because we had an 8-hour day. And no one can handle that online. No one can handle it live online or even asynchronously online. Mm-hmm. And so this is now our opportunity to get better at instructional design and say, we were putting that all in that 8-hour day because, well, I flew everybody there and I had to.
Right.
Right. And so now it's like, let me look at, what do people need to learn together? What do they need to work through live together? They blocked their calendar. They can talk to other live human beings at the same time. What makes a better learning experience because of that?
Well, it's fascinating. It does. It makes you, from an instructional design standpoint, you have to be more intentional about the design of it, because you're right. Nobody wants to be on Zoom for, I think 3 hours on Zoom is a long time, I probably wouldn't go more than that, but you have to be more intentional about how you're using that time, especially now. Not only people are virtual, but then they're all in different time zones. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. There's I'm working at night right now because I've got China. And so it's like, it's 10 o'clock when we end. I'm not ready to go to sleep till midnight.
I did last October, I did a 2-day workshop virtually for a group of instructional designers in Russia, in Moscow.
Oh, yeah.
And originally I was going to go there in person, but then, the pandemic happened. I was really fast. I really wanted to go to Moscow. I thought that would have been fascinating. But, and so the workshop took place from 10 p.m. my time until like 7:30 in the morning my time. So it was up literally all night. And then not only did I have to deal with being up all night, which affected my facilitation. By the end of each day, I don't know what I was saying to these poor people. But on top of that, they didn't speak English.
Oh, yeah.
And so what we had, and the first time I had ever seen this, and it was really amazing. Zoom has an interpreter feature. So we had the person assigned as the interpreter, and the interpreter could hear me, but the participants could only hear the interpreter. And so she worked for the UN. She was a UN interpreter. And it was fascinating how well in real time she was able to interpret my stuff. But the thing that I learned is that humor did not interpret well.
Right.
But you just have to be more intentional all around. So I'm curious to know, and you kind of alluded to this a moment ago, is there anything in your experience that works better in the virtual environment versus the in-person environment? Like, I think a lot of times people are biased towards the in-person environment, thinking that's the optimal experience. But is there anything that you, in your opinion or your experience, is better virtually than in person?
Like a whole long list of things. First off, what I do,
tell us.
it's ridiculous to try to teach you to be a virtual presenter when you're not online.
Yeah.
Like I just don't do it. I can talk about it, but then we'll do the real work when we get back online in the real environment. Customer service training. Come on. They sit at a desk answering phones. Why are we teaching that in person? We can emulate the exact environment online.
Right. Like turn off your camera and and talk to people, right? On the phone or with your headphones in, right?
Here's a cool thing we did. We were doing sales training. And this was when I worked at Dale Carnegie, actually. They would gather everybody together and we would use the computer audio. So a while ago. It was like a decade ago. Okay. Yeah. But it's still such a cool thing. So everybody's in class and we were using, whatever. I'll say it was Adobe Connect. Okay. Yeah. And they had they were learning how to do the cold calling. Okay. Everything, I think. But they had a process and the process was on a whiteboard and each person had a line designated to them on the whiteboard. Okay. Sure. Like a slide that we were going to annotate. And we went through the whole process and then each person muted their connection on the computer audio and they actively made a phone call, cold call to a prospect. Oh. And as they're on the call, each of them are doing this and we couldn't hear any of that. We didn't want to. They were annotating what was happening as they were going through it, taking notes on the whiteboard in the class.
That's super
for the
cool.
cold call that they made. And then we would regroup and be like, what happened? It was amazing.
So they went and actually practiced like in their real world that's super cool.
Isn't that the coolest thing?
That would be harder to implement in a real classroom for sure.
You couldn't. You'd have to all leave the room because you don't have the mute in an in-person space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So there's certain things, anything like immediate application, little bits of learning. We talk about microlearning, and virtual instructor led is not the same as microlearning. Microlearning is little teeny bits, right? But this idea though that we're having learning in the moment of need, and you're able to apply what people are doing at their desks in their own environment. Like I used to teach Excel and Word and all that fun stuff. Mm-hmm. I would get there like an hour early and I would make it look, every single toolbar looked the same. Every single computer, when you press start, Excel was perfect. And then you go back to your own desk and you have different toolbars and missing icons, right?
Right. Yep.
So more challenging for me as a trainer when I'm teaching Excel online, but actually more realistic for you.
Because you're working in your real environment.
You're in your real environment and you're on it. And it's hard, but guess what? That's also your job. And so now I get to help you through what you do every day in a moment that's actually going to be very applicable to you. So my job as the virtual trainer is to make that comfortable enough and relevant enough for you to have those experiences.
Sure.
I'm not doing it right if I'm just going to gather you all live and just talk through the perfect world of Excel.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
I don't need to do that. In fact, I would say, why don't we have a blended approach where we have beautiful modules of how you click through stuff that you watch. Mm-hmm. And then why don't we come together and deal with the problems of when you tried that, it didn't work for you. What did you do? That's what we need to do live.
Yep. That totally makes sense. Yeah. So what about, I'm curious, is this something you're seeing more of or you don't recommend, or what are your thoughts on hybrid classrooms where some people are in person, some people are virtual, maybe the facilitator is virtual, but people are in person or vice versa? Does that work as well? Or do you find struggles with that? Or do you not see that frequently?
Most people who are trying it have decided that it's not working. Yeah. Because here's the thing about it. And I just did it, I just did it at ATD, right? I had people in person.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It just that dawned on me too. Yes, you're absolutely right. So, yeah.
Conferences are different than a training though, right?
Sure,
it's a learning event, but it's not I'm not testing everybody's skills after a conference, So if you have one person online and you want to include them, guess what? Every single thing now needs to be able to be done online.
Right. Yep.
So everybody that was with me in person at ATD, they didn't need to be there because I designed the whole thing to be available online to all people. So anybody sitting in front of me was just doing all the stuff online. So it's people are realizing pretty quickly if, like the whole, like if I'm going to bring a ball, well, I'm not going to, if I choose to exclude, which is what I used to do prior to 18 months ago, it'll be fine. They don't want to throw the ball anyway. That's what we would do. Right?
Yep.
It's terrible to say, but it's the truth, right?
Right.
Now people are like, no, we can't leave them out anymore.
Yeah.
So the people that are in person, maybe we're doing two separate things. You've actually got the ball in person and you've got a version of it online. But then that begs to, well, now why are we separating everybody when we thought we were bringing everyone together? So let's just have everybody that's in person also do it online. And then my next question would become, why are we in person?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, not that I'm not an advocate for some things need to be in person. Some things obviously like dancing and swimming and, driving a car, performing a surgery. There's a lot of things that need to be done. But
well, one of the things I'll mention this because now that you bring up ACD, one of the things I really like that they did, I had a session where, like, as you mentioned, for those of you maybe didn't go to ATD or are unaware. So there was the in-person conference, but they were also streaming it live to virtual attendees. And what was really nice is the chat. We had a moderator, a producer, and they were monitoring the chat for both the virtual and in-person folks. But what I really liked is after I did my session, about 30 minutes later, there was a virtual Q&A just for the virtual folks to have some, FaceTime with me. I really liked that, but I agree with you. I mean, I remember, I don't know how long ago this was, a month or two ago, I called you up asking your advice on an icebreaker activity because I was leading a meeting that had most people in person, but I had 2 participants virtually. And it totally changed everything. I mean, because you don't want to exclude those people. Obviously, you want them to feel included. And it just, it all goes back to, you have to be more intentional about what you do and more thoughtful.
It does. I love that. That's the theme of ours, intention.
Yeah.
Intentional. And, too, Tim, there's a difference between a presentation and a training.
Oh, totally. Yep.
Like presenting out information and opening it up to Q&A. It doesn't matter if we're in person or online. And that's such a great example of where a hybrid's going to work. I do very much believe in hybrid teams, obviously. But, when we come to the training and I'm responsible for skills-based applications.
Yep.
If we're online, if one person's online, I'm going to have to make the whole thing accessible online.
Yep.
And so I think you just have to look at what am I now doing, and then what's the purpose, and what's getting in the way of the ultimate objectives.
Right. I had a previous job where a good half of the team, maybe a third to almost half of the team was virtual, and then the other half was all in person at this one particular office. And eventually, when we would have our meetings, like we originally would, everyone in person would get in a conference room, and then we would conference send the virtual people. And then we just realized this doesn't make any sense. And so we were just all virtual all the time, even though the people who were in the office, there were times where I would just have meetings with just the people in the office, and we would still just do it over Zoom, even though we were down the hall.
Oh, I know. Same.
But yeah.
Because the audio becomes difficult in the in-person event.
Oh, I know. Right.
We attended Zoomtopia this week. It was just the last 2 days. Did anyone see the screens for what they did to make that work?
Oh, no. I didn't even know they had. Was it their annual conference?
Yeah, they had their annual users conference.
Oh, okay.
And so it was pretty slick. And they've also launched a new event platform that was really nice, I got to say.
Okay.
Can't wait for the conferences to start using the Zoom event platform now. But I'll tell you one of the cool things are in a second that I saw. But I did see some behind the scenes because somebody posted a video of himself doing his talk, and he's basically in a television studio, and there's a ton of people all around him with a ton of hardware and a ton of equipment and all sorts of cameras and all sorts of television screen or monitors, and he was in an entire room that was a green screen.
Okay.
So
that's
it's a full-on television production to get audio and video to work perfectly, as you know.
Yeah.
And so this idea that we'll just dial in from a conference room is a lot more than what people recognize.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, good.
The thing I saw that's cool if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, their Zoom event thing. It's a new platform that they launched at Zoomtopia. When you're in the lobby, you know how most of them, it's just a listing of all the sessions?
Yep.
Zoomtopia had it live streaming on mute. So as I was going through, look at them, I could actually see every single one of them working.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Like, I don't know. I felt like I guess it's what our TV does, right? Or you can kind of see what's happening. And so and then you could just click on it and unmute it if you wanted to. You didn't have to even join the session. You could watch them from the lobby.
That's super cool.
I liked it.
Yeah. I hope the conferences start adopting that. I can't wait to see that in person and how that works. That's super cool. Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's pivot to some of the questions. We have some questions coming into the questions pod, and for those of you who joined us maybe a little later, if you have questions for Kassy or myself, feel free to put them in the questions pod, and you can upvote on others. So our first one comes from Patricia Gould. Hey, Patricia. And Patricia wants to know, how do you get someone who is not used to technology out of their comfort zone of lecture from a PowerPoint? Like, how do you get somebody from that, that lecture to being a facilitator, probably in a virtual environment? What's your thoughts on that, Kassy?
So that's you're teaching a person who's a subject matter expert. Like, you're the instructional designer who's got the SME, who's just a lecturer, and it's not working. So you're doing the best you can. Just record that person and put them in little snippets. That's the answer. But if they have to deliver live, I mean, how do you get someone to do anything is what this goes back to. And I always go back to my Dale Carnegie days with this, asking people questions of what kind of responses they want and helping them to realize, it's like, when I'm going to get my hair done tomorrow, and I'm not going to go to my hairdresser and tell her how to cut my hair. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell her what I want it to look like.
Yep.
And then she's going to get me there. And so if you can ask questions on what you want end result to look like, when people are done listening to you in your ideal world, subject matter expert, what will we be doing? What will we have gotten out of this? And then you come at it with more questions. What do you think if right here we do this? What if you think right here we do this? And I think people need a model of how it can be different. And I think people need to feel good about the work they're doing, not bad.
Sure.
And so we have to honor that subject matter expertise and come at it from this positive angle. And I do it all through questions. And I coach the same exact way.
Yeah.
What do you think what do you think you do well? What do you love most about what you do? What would you like to do a little differently? How do you think you'd like to get there? Like, what would you do? How do you do that in person? When you make that happen in person, what do you do? And then I say, a suggestion. Here's how I might do that online. How do you feel about that? So you have to get, Dale Carnegie said, people will support a world that they help create.
I love that.
You need to get that person to build that world, and you have to guide them to what that world will look like and be like. And then they have to agree that they like that, and then they'll do it.
Well, and I think in this case, Patricia, the one thing I would say I agree with everything Kassy just said, but also that person has to want to improve. Like, they have to want to receive that feedback and become better at whatever it is that they're doing. And if they're not comfortable with the technology, exposure to it, practice with it, the feedback is how they're going to improve over time, if that's what they want. I see all the time where people put subject matter experts out in front of the room, and the subject matter expert just does a information dump on the people. But unless they're facilitators or working on being facilitators, you're going to get exactly that, because that's what subject matter experts do. And so that person has to want to get better. And in time, that will happen with the right feedback and the right exposure. And
you have to market around it too. You have to market that subject matter expertise and help the subject matter expert realize people don't just listen.
Right. And maybe you just need to record them and have them watch that recording, and then it'll be cringeworthy enough for them to, hopefully elicit a change. But one of the things, Kassy, you mentioned this before we hopped on. You were talking about how, and I think this is true in this case as well, is maybe the issue isn't just the facilitation, but maybe it's the design of the training. And maybe the training hasn't been designed to make it anything other than lecture. You mentioned something really good, interesting about instructional designers being sometimes better than trainers. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, Tim, literally every time I'm teaching trainers, I'm doing the best I can to help them, and they're doing the best they can. But sometimes we will come to an agreement and say, you know what, this design just bites.
Right. Yeah.
So and now they go, oh, what's next? And whenever people are looking at advancing their virtual instructor-led training skills, I encourage the design route. Let's look at what are we doing in this moment? Why are we wasting time going over the history of the company?
Right.
Those things could be in the form of trivia, and we could turn that into a game, and that could be at break. It doesn't need to be a whole lecture. We're wasting time, And so that's coming from an instructional design strategy. And the thing that I find very interesting that I was telling you about in our pre-session was, this is amazing to me. And please know, I am a trainer, you all, okay? My background is training, and then I learned instructional design because I loved it and I wanted to be better at my job, okay? So this comes from the heart, okay? If I'll train a trainer and then they'll do a teach back and they'll do a good job, okay? Then I'll take a designer and that trainer, let's say that trainer has never done any instructional design work, okay?
Right.
They'll be fine. But then I'll take an instructional designer and have them practice a teach back just to be in the shoes of the trainer. I can't tell you how many times the instructional designer is actually better at the delivery than the trainer. It's amazing to me. And they're not presenters, but because they're paying attention to the strategy and the purpose and the reason, it comes off better.
Right. Well,
better
I think that
because we learned something rather than it was a comedy hour.
And it illustrates why the trainers, facilitators, and instructional designers need to be working in lockstep with one another, right? To understand the intention. This is not directly related, but it's something that I thought about this. This is not directly related to what you said or Patricia's question, but one thing that really helped me, this was before I ever got into the world of training. Back when I used to catch shoplifters for a living in retail loss prevention, I worked part-time at an Apple store. And one of the things they teach their store associates when they're training their store associates to help customers troubleshoot problems on their computers or on their iPhones. One of the rules that they have is that you're not allowed to point at the screen. And you have to use your words. And so when they train people, these store associates, on how to help you reset your password, they train you by making you put your hands behind your back and hold your hands behind your back and tell people, like, say, okay, I want you to go to the upper left-hand corner and click the blue tab that says reset password. And then, and it's amazing. That little thing, it just changed the way I've thought about how you communicate instructions to people that enable them to do it rather than just saying, click here, do this, do that, do that. You know what I mean? Like a GPS. Right, because you're doing it for them.
You do it for them. Right,
exactly. And they're not paying attention and they're not learning as a result of it. Okay.
And how much that must have helped you forever, like moving forward.
I think, I know. Or when I create technical training, you know what I mean? I think about, like, how do I help somebody understand what I'm doing beyond just pointing at what I want them to do, right?
Yeah. It's like, thank you, Apple University. I know, right? One of my early questions that I learned 100,000 years ago in my very first Train the Trainer programmings was to never say what questions. I can't even remember now. Do you have a question?
Right. I say, what questions do you have?
Who has the first question? And I can't.
Oh, I love that.
Can't say it differently now.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you become the virtual trainer, who has the first question? Raise your hand.
Yeah.
Tack on the tech. Who's got a question? Type it in the chat.
Yeah.
Tack on the tech.
Yeah. I love that. I use what questions do you have? I don't.
Yeah. What questions do you have? Enter them in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Speaking of questions, our next question comes from Amy, and Amy wants to know, aside from creating something like a 10 tips job aid for new instructors, facilitators, do you have any other ideas for managing a team of virtual instructors? Do you have some best in class examples to share where we can show top tier skills on display for, I assume, for helping new virtual instructors, trainers?
My entire company answers those questions.
Yes, just go to Kassy's website.
An epic question. I'm loving it. There's 100 questions in there, Amy. I know, I love it.
Yeah.
You know what? Literally, though, on my website under my resources, you could probably send them some of my webinars in there. I don't know that it's specifically for virtual teams, but it is. Virtual teams and trainers is my whole life. So. Yeah. Anytime I'm presenting and doing things, you might be able to use that as an example of, what you're looking for.
Yeah,
there might be some cool stuff up there for you to watch. And then Amy, connect with me on LinkedIn and let's get some more, we'll start drilling down those 100 questions. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I think the big answer to actually both these questions is that people, they are often inspired when they see something that's working. And I think that's what's driving Amy's question just a little bit there. And we were talking about the subject matter expert, if they could see examples of things. And I think modeling the outcomes that you want is a really big way to help people to learn and to see what can be done. And when I'm working with virtual team leaders, I'm always like, are the bosses on the instant messaging programs? Oh, no, they don't have time. Okay, then neither do we. We don't have time to be on the team.
Right.
And so we need to model the behavior that we're interested in the people around us demonstrating. And when I teach my Train the Trainer certificate programming, it's as much of a model as it is, here's some content.
Yep.
Yeah. Like I very much believe in immersion. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do that all the time. I mean, it's a different context, but I think the essence of what you're trying to say is, when you see a good example, capture that, remember it, and model that in the future. And I do that all the time. Like recently, I just got, I stumbled across, there's a company called Webflow. It's a web development company where you can create your own website. And I went to they have this whole section called Webflow University, and it's their online courses. And the production quality of these videos of what they create is just awesome. And I'm constantly, one of the things I do is I'm constantly capturing examples of things that I want to, emulate in my own work. And so
I do the same thing, Tim. Little known, here's WebPro. I just went and looked at it. I'm always talking about how I want to make little videos to support my training programs. And whenever I talk to people about it, which is recently, I'm like, I want to look like Tim looks in my videos.
I appreciate it.
It's true.
Thank you. All right, cool. Our next question comes from Joyce. Hey, Joyce. Joyce wants to know, does the quality of the training diminish when presenting virtually and you do not force participants to have their cameras on? So does the quality of training diminish when you're presenting virtually when the participants don't have their cameras on? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I came up in a time when if we turned our cameras on, the thing would break. So my answer to that is no. And plus, a lot of people do not look good on camera. So there's that thing. But I think that it's very nice what Zoom has done. Zoom changed the world of us being on camera, as did probably FaceTime a little bit. But no. Quality of training is based upon objectives and completion and application of objectives, not on whether or not somebody was smiling on camera the whole time. I'm a great actor. I can smile on the camera and make you feel like I'm listening, and I'm running a whole show without you behind me. So it's not about the camera. It's about what you're doing. And if you're actually authentically connecting with people and they're having learning moments that matter and that can be applied for the purpose of being there.
Yeah. I mean, I think, in fact, I can think of times when I was a participant in a virtual training with my camera on, I spend more time thinking about, do I look okay on camera? Am I okay? What's happening behind me? Than the actual content. And there's sometimes, like, I don't know if anybody's ever had this feeling, like when you get to turn off your camera, this kind of like, you know what I mean? Like you get to finally just kind of relax, you know what I mean? And take a breather and stop staring at your camera so you can see if you look okay. And so I think there are times, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've been in virtual meetings where, I was the only person with my camera on, and it was not fun to be the only person with my camera on, and I wanted to be able to connect with people. There's a time where I think it makes sense to have cameras on.
Oh, I love them. I love it. Like right now I'm working with this company, and they're a little resistant to the cameras. But I've gotten them to agree that every time they talk, they'll come on camera and talk to me. So we're in this, like, you do not have to be on the whole time, but come on when you talk. And they're getting slowly used to it. And, and I'm telling them, look, when you're training, you got to be on camera and the people expect it. I'm trying to have like an empathetic approach towards all the people, because it's hard all the time. And another really important point that I love to make with my participants is, listen, y'all don't have like a studio around you with a group of people putting makeup on you, and lighting on you. You get to be a normal person. Do you have to stare at the camera the whole time? No, you get to look around sometimes and not be perfect. That's okay. Now, that's when you're attending. When you're presenting and you're a trainer, I think you got to look into the camera, but not the whole time, because nobody wants a monologue.
Right.
So, I mean, if I were to look into, this is my camera right here. I'm looking at a little tiny black dot right now to make it look like I'm talking to you. I can't see, unless it's my peripheral vision, what else is happening. And so I really do want to look at the chat. And so when I look at the chat, this is what this looks like. But then I come over here to answer.
I
I
know.
feel like,
It's the same thing. Like I'm looking at a camera. Your face to me is over here. I don't know what facial expressions you made this whole conversation until I go back and watch the recording. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
I totally get that. Yeah.
I'm just a big fan of normal, like comfortable. Like, let's
Yeah.
be real people. We're not, unfortunately, we're not all super famous Hollywood stars attending the Met Gala, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Speaking of the Met Gala, I was thinking the other day, this is a sidetrack conversation. I was like, you know what would have been, there was so much drama about who was there. And I was like, you know what would have been cool? It was the 20th year anniversary of 9/11. And then after the pandemic, like it should have been like first responders and nurses and people like that should have been.
yeah, but it just shows you how out of touch.
I know.
Right?
Okay. That's just my side thought on that. Oh, what I was going to say though, back to Joyce's question, the last thing I was going to say about that is it's kind of what you said is the same. It's kind of the same etiquette rules with muting and unmuting. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And same thing with the camera, right? Like I love the idea that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can be on camera when you're talking and then turn it off when you're not. It's not a big deal. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Not a big deal.
Okay.
What's the big deal is wasting everybody's time and lecturing and being boring and not helping them do my job better. That's what's a problem.
I agree.
And when people are like, were they on the camera the whole time? I'm like, I don't know. Are they doing the job?
Right. Exactly. Yep. Okay. So our next question comes from Susan. How do you playfully yet easily help people with technical requirements access of vILT? It seems this can be derailing the training. I'll tell you my experience on this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Kassy. I mean, I used to facilitate a storyline certificate program through ATD. And when I would train that program, it would be taught virtually with like 30 participants. And software training can be incredibly, and just let alone like somebody who's never used a virtual instructor-led platform or attended virtual training, there's a technical barrier there. But then trust me, like it gets way more technical or more difficult when you're doing software training virtually, because you can't just like walk over to somebody's screen and they can point at what's not working.
Touch it like you want to
touch it, right? And so sometimes one of the things I learned from that experience is sometimes it can just take one participant having one error that can derail the class for 15 minutes trying to get that person back on track. And so that's where, I don't know your thoughts on this, Kassy. I have recruited my producer to not just be, sometimes when I'm doing technical training, I want my producer to also be able to jump in and do like jump into a breakout room with that person to troubleshoot not just the virtual platform, but also whatever I might be teaching if they're able to. I don't know. What has been your experience with that? I think that's where the producer comes into play that can help you.
Big time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like every class. So I have, first off, there's a link there on my website. If you scroll down to that section for them under the virtual classroom materials section, there's some examples of what I'm talking about right about now. How I handle this and what I do, because this is huge. Mm-hmm. If you don't prepare participants to be in the environment, you can't do anything. And, they've got to know how to be there and the stuff has to work. If I'm going to call on you and have you unmute, you have to be on the audio and it has to work. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I have this thing called the learning lunch, or sometimes I call it the sneak peek. But what I do is I make sure that we can all use the tool and it's working for everybody in the very beginning of the session. And I am having my producer help when things don't work, but I'm doing this in a fun, get to know you. Let's set the stage for how the whole program is going to work. And I'm coming at it from, here's how we'll communicate when we're together. So let's say we're in Zoom, whether we've been in Zoom before or not, here's how I use it for us today. Mm-hmm. And this covers if somebody's never used something before in a way that's going to feel comfortable for them. And I just go through it in like 10 minutes, the opening, and I run all introductions and all the stuff that's going to happen for the class at the same time I'm teaching them how to be there. And sort of setting that stage for, like I don't go, we're going to use the chat and on the right is the chat. And when I don't do it. I'm like, hey, how's everyone doing? Type it in the chat. And they go, where's the chat?
Right.
And then I'll go, okay, yeah. And let's talk about, anytime that you come back from a break or something that you need, you're going to put up a green check using reactions. And so let's check the green check who's excited to be here right now and doing that. And we just do it within the context of what I need to accomplish in each moment. Because I don't have time to be like, let me cover every single feature in Zoom that we might use.
I know. I can't begin to tell you how much I despise those orientations. We're like,
And a sub note on that, guys, you can try sending them a video and you can try sending them documents on how to use Zoom, Adobe, WebEx, whatever. They will not read it. They will not learn it by watching it. They will learn it when they have to do it in the moment of need.
Yep. And they'll have forgotten it by the time they get into the virtual classroom anyways.
Yeah. You can make the beautiful document and then you'll be changing it all the time because Zoom changes every day.
Yeah.
And you can make the video, which is a lot of work and a lot of effort, as Tim knows.
Yeah.
And they'll still need you to teach them how to do it.
Yeah.
So I teach people in the moment of need when they need that tool.
Yep. That's a great tip. I love that.
And I do it with like, it's always the computer's fault. It's never the person's fault.
Right. Yep. You're absolutely right.
Like, Sam, why is your computer not letting you unmute? This isn't right. Let's see if we can help you. And if I absolutely can't make it work, I'm 100% on board with the producer. You know, my second book was on the topic of the producer and I couldn't love that more.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Good. Okay. I think we have time for one more question. We'll do one. Bella. Hey, Bella. Bella wants to know, do you have any tips or methods you employ to help keep vILT on track? For example, when the learners may stray from the topic or you foresee an issue with not being able to include the content in the time frame allotted.
My life every day. Every single day. We talk about adaptability and flexibility being high on the skill set of behaviors for virtual trainers because it never goes according to plan. Yeah. But what I do is I have a plan and then I have alternatives in place. And then I have to be good and kind to myself and to my participants because I very much believe that I do not have a job if I did not have participants. So it is always about them and their needs. It's also up to me to be leading through with, you know, with an eye and an ear towards what are they engaged with. And if they happen to really need to deep dive on something in that moment, I have to have enough understanding in that moment to let it be. And then to say, okay, we're going to have to do what was remaining today in a different format. And this is why most of my the programmings that I'm delivering, they're not usually just one session. They're usually more than one. And I have a blended approach with discussion boards and readings and things. And so sometimes things are being changed. I'll cut that one example and we'll put that example on a discussion board and talk through it that way. And, you know, and the people that have a difficult time with flexibility are the ones that struggle the most with any training, actually. But I do think that in a virtual environment, especially in our day and age, you're always going to be making changes. And so on the design side, it's really good to have things designed knowing that I might have to change that. Right. So when I'm working with designers, I'm showing them like, look how much time this is going to take me. And if they really need more here, here's what I'm going to have to cut. Yep. And here's, you know, what ways would you suggest I alter that if I'm working with the designer? You know?
Yep. I when I used to do my storyline certificate, that would never, I mean, there was always the designed thing I was supposed to do each session, and it never went according to the session. And it got to such a point where I would tell my participants, you know, the participant guide is a guide, but we're probably we're gonna deep dive into things that come up, and because every class is unique and every participant's needs are unique and what interests them. And I would rather have a 30-minute or an hour diversion where my participants were super engaged on a tangent than, you know, forcing them to follow the guide if it may not be exactly what they need. Right. So.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a guide and it's a resource and it's a kind of a living thing that we work together through.
Yeah, I agreed. All right, good. Well, so before we wrap up, a couple things I'm going to put in chat for you all. First, feel free to join us inside the eLearning Designers community. It's a small but growing community. We have almost 1,000 members now. It's completely free, and it's a space for people who are looking to get into e-learning or instructional design. And we do all sorts of fun things. We do monthly challenges and feedback Fridays and all sorts of cool stuff. And then feel free to check out my 8-week cohort program, the eLearning Designers Academy, if you're looking to upskill yourself on storyline or build your portfolio or learn about the e-learning design development process. And then, of course, if you want to check out our full schedule of future webinars, you can see that in chat as well. So, Kassy, thank you so much for joining me today. I so appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun. And
where can people connect with you if they want to follow you or check you out online?
Yeah, for sure. You know what? The most active place right now, I'm loving LinkedIn. I just really love the interactions there and what happens. And so I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. I have a website as well, and my books are listed there and lots of other resources. And also we're updating it right now. I've got a whole new thing coming out, which should be really fun. Because I, in the last year, created the virtual training hero. And so I really like a superhero theme. And I got a lot of fun things coming that are going to be around that superhero idea, because I believe virtual trainers are superheroes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming, Kassy, and thank you all for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye, everybody.